Welcome to another Thursday night fly tying. Tonight, we're going to do a couple of flies. I'll show you the first one. I remember how to work Zoom. There you go. First one's the Mcginty. And these are going to be a couple of wet flies. And hopefully we'll go over a few different techniques that will help with, well, I mean, it helps with a lot of different fly patterns, but if you want to kind of get into wet flies a little bit, they're a lot of fun to tie, kind of like a um, gateway drug to salmon flies and stuff like that, because a lot of them are real, some of them are fancy and married wings and all that other kind of stuff. But um, the Mcginty was originally developed for bass in 1883 by Charles Mcginty from Chicago. But this works excellent as a trout and panfish fly. The original pattern called for a body of alternating black and yellow chenille, a tail of red feather fibers topped with gray mallard, and a brown hackle throat, and a quill wing from the blue-black mallard secondary wing feathers, where they're tipped with white by the time you strip those quill slips off of there. I'm just going to do a gray quill slip wing. Over the years, the pattern changed to just using natural gray duck quill sections. Got all the materials there. Any 2X wet fly hook. I'm just going to use a standard wet fly hook. With the Mcginty, since you have the alternating stripes of chenille, sometimes it turns out a little better with having a longer body. It just kind of looks better to the person's eye. But it was originally designed with a standard wet fly hook. I'm going to try to do the red duck with a little bit of mallard flank over the top, and we'll see if it turns out as nice as that picture. And then a brown hen hackle, and again, duck or turkey quill slips. I'm going to try to do the couple of different methods on doing the hackle, beard, and some of that. So hopefully we can cover a few different ways of doing things. So I'm going to switch back to materials here. So, wow, that's crazy. So for the body, I'm going to use black and yellow chenille. Just a black 6/0 thread is what I'm going to use. And then again, I'm going to do this one as a beard. I'll kind of show you what to do if you can't find the right sizing of hen hackle. If your hen hackle that you have, or you want to use saddle hackle and it's a little bit longer than what you can do to actually wrap a hackle. For the wings will be gray quill slips. And the tail, I'm going to use a little bit of this red I'm going to top it with some mallard flank. So, switch cameras here. So again, this is just like a standard wet fly hook. And I'm going to start the thread about an eye length back and just start to lay down a smooth. And the Mcginty, since we're using chenille, it's not as critical to have a smooth thread base, but it's always a good practice to make it as smooth as possible. uh, and then it's muscle memory and just the way you do things. So if you do have a fly where it's critical, then you're covered. So I'm going to go ahead all the way back to the end of the shank here. So when I let it hang, it'll be right at the barb of the hook there. And then I'm going to take a piece of this red duck quill, and I haven't used a whole lot of this. So for the tail, I don't want it to be like real thick. So I'm going to just separate using my bodkin. I'm just going to grab maybe about 3 or 4 strands there. Cut that loose. And you could try to do 2 opposing quill slips. But for a tail like this, especially on a wet fly, you can just go with 1. Then I'm going to take a couple strands from this mallard flank, and I'm going to see if I can marry those on. I'm going to cut those loose. And line those up with the curve, with the same curve. And I'm going to see if I can the problem is I'm not really paying attention to a left and right feather for the mallard and the duck. It looks like it's marrying pretty good here. Just that the mallard flank is separating at the tips there. But I'm going to go ahead and go with that. I want the tail to actually extend about a shank's length. That didn't really marry. Let me try the other side of that mallard flank feather and see if I can get that to marry. So I'm going to strip some of these down to where I get a nice clean section here of feather barbs. Grab about 3 of them. And we'll see if that'll work. If it won't, I'll just give up on the project. Lay them up on top and then just stroke them together and hope that they kind of Velcro themselves together a little bit. Looks like the mallard really doesn't want to stick together itself, but that first one looks like it married to the quill. I'm just going to go ahead and tie this in as it is. So I'll go with about a shank length, and then I'll measure that with my fingers. And then I'll do a pinch wrap where I bring the thread between that feather and my thumb, come around the other side between that feather and my finger, and then pinching against the hook shank, I'll just pull straight down and then wrap forward from that point to secure everything. So that should be nice and flat on that hook shank. And I'll come forward toward the front and cut off the waist. Now I'll come back as smooth as I can here. To the back. And I'll take a piece of yellow chenille. about 2 card lengths, and a piece of black about the same. And I'll take each one and just strip off a little bit of this fluff to where I have the string core exposed. And I'll tie it in by that. And I'll clip this up out of the way. Sorry about that. Then I'll do the same to the yellow. Expose that string core and tie that in so I don't have a bump. And then I'll come forward to about 2 eye lengths back from the eye of the hook there. Now, you can do this a few ways. You could wrap all the way forward with black and then use the yellow as sort of a rib to get the black and yellow stripes. Sometimes that's easier. You can also just try to wrap them together like this, and you can just as easily get the stripes. Let me tighten that hook some. So now I'm going to tie that off right there about 2 eye lengths back. Nice and tight. Go around the shank of the hook, and then I'll clip out that excess. Now I want to try to minimize the bulk there since I have 2 thick chenilles right there. I'm going to move that out of the way and then just kind of brush away some of that fuzz. And then that's ready to go. Now, I said that in this particular case, if I was to wrap this hackle, it's going to be way too big for the size of the hook. But I can take these barbs and kind of stroke them so they're about 90 degrees away from the stem. And then just grab about a 1/2 inch worth and just pull the rachis away. For the most part, those butts are aligned. I'm going to try to gather them. And then you can just kind of loosely hold those feather barbs and just tap it with your finger. And that will kind of help line up those butts. And then kind of helps if you turn it upside down. You can line that up so that the butts are on my side of the hook eye, and then take a couple tight wraps. So that'll give me that beard and it won't be twisted around the hook. So I'm going to take a couple more wraps here and then clean out the butts here. Okay.
Actually, Mike, now you can use Al's trick of using the lighter, and we can have a little bit of smoke on the water.
No lighters for me right now. So now I'm going to prepare my my wings. So I've got opposing wing feathers. This is a mallard wing feathers. So I've got a right and a left. I know that because if I look at the most colorful side facing me, I've got the long barbs on opposite sides. So I'm going to use a hackle pliers to do this. It's the easiest way. I'm going to grab one of these hooks. And I'm going to measure my wing by using the hook gap. That way every fly I tie is going to have the same width of a wing. And strip that out. So there's one wing section. I'll cut that away from the rachis. Set it on the edge of my pedestal, and then I'll go for the other one. Do the same thing. Measure it with the gap of the hook. Separate that. And then cut it loose. Let me marry that back together. That kind of split a little bit on me. Might have to grab a different section. What I'm doing just to kind of remarry it, just grab it and just kind of stroke it like that. Now you can take the two sections then, and you have to look at the curve of the feathers. You want them to curve together. Like that. And for the Mcginty, I kind of like it to be a wing like that, where it's tips together, but the tips are down. You see what I'm talking about? You can also do it with the tips up. Like this. Like I said, I kind of like the look of this
Mike,
fly.
could you
Make
show the
sure that,
top? Could you
go ahead.
flip it? Could you flip it so I can see the top of the feather? Just turn your like that.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So the tips are together and they're aligned here. So the curved sides of the feather are curving into each other. So it's kind of like folded together. And that's where I want the wing. Again, I could do it with the tips up. I could do it with the tips separated. So if I don't want to ruin these slips, but I could do it like this where the wingtips oppose like that and mount it like that. If you look at the top of the fly, it would be like that. And then of course you could do that with the tips up and apart. Hopefully I haven't destroyed these. I think they'll be all right. Get the tips aligned. Yeah, I've kind of messed with these quite a bit. So I'm going to set the wing so that it's about halfway down that tail. And then come over it with that same pinch wrap where I've got the thread between my thumb and the feather, and let it come down on the opposite side and just let the weight of my bobbin hang down. Now I'm going to take that feather and just let it collapse under the weight of the bobbin. I'm still pinching it against the hook shank. And then I'm going to pull it tight and take a wrap forward toward the eye. And then one more. And so my wing should be perpendicular to the hook shank there. Just like that. Now you can take it, adjust it just a little bit. And there, that's centered pretty good. So I'm going to take a couple more tight wraps so I don't mess everything up. And then go ahead and clip that away. And I have crowded my hook eye a little bit, but I think I can survive by pushing that with my thumbnail and then wrapping back toward the back of the fly. I should be able to save it. And we better call that good enough. Back to front whip finish. And that's the Mcginty.
Hey, Mike, I've got a quick
Yes.
question. What part of the wing did that come from on the mallard?
So the primary quills, as they call them, that's why they always call these quill wings. The
Okay.
primary feathers, flight feathers, if you will.
Are they the tips or the interior next to the body?
The interior next to the body, I think they call those under coverts.
Okay.
The actual, like the flight feathers, the ones that stick out the longest, that's what
Okay.
these are.
Okay. I got more mallard in the way on the way. I've just got the wrong side coming in.
Right. Now, it's not to say you couldn't use those other feathers. It's just for these wings. Trying to think if Eric Austin's any of his videos really talk about the actual like part of that wing that that those are picked from. That's the Mcginty.
Can you use Canadian geese feathers?
Yes, duck or goose. You could also use turkey. Um, any gray feather like that. It just, as far as texture, you know, these duck quills are fairly cheap to buy. If you buy them from a fly shop, you can. They normally come like here. All these red ones, it's two pairs. So you've got two left and two right, and they come in a package. You can get gray like that, white, black, yellow, you know, a lot of different colors. And again, if you're marrying wings for different fancy wet flies like that, it usually seems like duck or goose are the best ones. Now, goose, I don't think you necessarily want to use those great big feathers. Uh, Again, I believe Eric Austin talked about these quills in maybe in one of the East meets West things with Al. Al, I don't know if you remember that, where he talked about the type of goose feather. I might be thinking of one of his other videos.
I'm at a loss, but we've also done so doggone many programs I can't remember.
Right.
Mike,
So for
Paul Pinellas has a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
He says, what is the purpose of the beard?
To balance out the I think it's to balance out the way that the fly is going to, say if you were doing it in still water, just to the way that it would ride in the water, but also if you just had the wing and the body, the beard just kind of say if it was a bait fish, it would kind of make more of that body shape. If you talk about less fancy flies, the beard is going to be the legs um, of the insect, maybe forming wings, depending on what pattern of a fly you're talking about. But the beard is either legs or just further shape of like a small bait fish, or just to round out the fly and make it look aesthetically pleasing. A lot of the fancier ones especially are for people's eyes, to make fishermen attract fishermen more than to attract the fish. But then also a lot of times it's a contrast as well. Like in the Royal Coachman, the beard is brown, but the rest of the fly is red, green, white. So let me go back to the materials. We won't run out of time here. For the Royal Coachman wet fly, the body is going to be red. The tail will be golden pheasant tippets. There will be a tag of peacock pearl, and then the wing is again duck quill slips, but it'll be white. And then that same, to me, that I don't know if that's Coachman brown, but it's a rich reddish brown that to me really goes well, color wise with this fly. And I'll use a little bit of floss on the body as well. So the Royal Coachman, it was first made in 1878 by John Haley from New York City. He was asked to tie some coachmen for a friend to take up to the North Woods. And if you look at the bottom fly there, that's like a lead wing coachman. That's a traditional fly from England. He was asked to make them extra strong. So he tied them with a band of red silk in the middle to prevent the delicate peacock herl bodies from coming unwound. For the original, he actually used barred wood duck flank feathers, our kind of wood duck. But the modern versions are all tied with a tail of golden pheasant tippets, like you see in that top picture. So we'll go back to the hook. I'm going to actually start with a red thread. And the reason is, in this particular case, the body is so like insignificant that it doesn't matter as much. But whenever you're using floss, if I was to use a black underbody and then that floss would get wet, that red would turn into a dark kind of nasty color. If you use red thread underneath it, then you don't have that black underneath the thread when it gets wet. So I'm just going to start that red thread on these golden pheasant tippets. If you look at this feather, there's a lot of stuff here on the side that doesn't have any black markings on it. So I'll strip those away. And then as I get in there a little bit, some of these are a little bit shorter on the end. There's a section there where it's a lot of, real even black barring. I want about 9 or 5 of these. Normally we have a tendency to use way too much of this golden pheasant on the tails of these kind of flies, just because it's kind of cool looking. But you want to kind of err on the side of less. So strip them away and then just kind of gather them and fold them a little bit here. So hopefully mostly I have the outside orange pretty colors showing. And then I'll make that about a shank length. And
Yeah, Mike, Al showed a really good technique for that, for tying in these last night. Sorry you missed it.
yeah, what was the technique just in a nutshell?
Basically, start with loose wraps toward the back to keep the bright colors facing up rather than rolling around so you get the bright colors, dull colors.
Right.
You've
And then
seen it
cinch it
before,
down.
Mike. It's called the buffer zone system.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Right.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about now. So the next thing I want to tie on is just a piece of strung peacock curl. I like to come out toward the tip here and just break off about the last inch. And if you can tell, if you look at the shape of a peacock curl, sometimes it's hard to do. But there's a thick stem, and you want the stem to be toward the front when you tie it down, and the barbule sticking up. So I think that's the way I have this oriented. I'm going to go ahead and tie this in. Right back at the back. And then I'll come forward and just take that peacock curl then. And with that stem moving forward, it gives you a nice solid fluffy peacock butt there. So I do about 9 or 5 turns and then tie that off, remove it. I'm going to take just one strand of this 4-strand rayon floss. If you have a lot of times, if I'm tying a few of these, I'll do it with a like 140 denier red thread. And if you use the silkier, shinier stuff like UTC, that's actually what I'm using here for this red thread, but it's 70 denier. If you use a thicker thread, a lot of times you can kind of get the same effect as this floss. It's just as shiny. And I'll just wrap that forward toward the front. I want to stay back about 1/3 right here. So I'll just take that floss and just make a nice smooth red band here in the middle. And that looks pretty even. I'll go ahead and tie that floss off. Bring my peacock curl back in. And tie in that second band of peacock curl. I usually find that if you make this one a little bit like fatter, it turns out a little better. And then I'll just break that off. For this one, I've got a hackle that's a little more appropriately sized. So I'm going to take the shiny side facing me. I'm going to isolate the tip here. And tie it in with a couple of wraps. And then just fold that back. and just kind of come back against there so the tip is facing backwards. And then if you hold the thread tight and you're feeling brave, you can snap it off. Otherwise, you can cut it off. Then I'm going to bring that back toward the eye. And then I'll use a hackle pliers just to be on the safe side. And then stroking this back. I'm going to make about at least 3 or 4 wraps here. This isn't the most dense feather, but that should be just about enough. And then I'll tie that off. Now, take these that I captured in there. I'm just going to kind of tie those down a little bit. And then I'm going to take all of this hackle and just stroke it downwards. I'll try to do it like this. And then just wrap over that section. Take a couple of wraps over it like that. And now you've got your beard down below. Pretty heavy. And then it also has even tips because you just wrapped it around the shank like that. That's my favorite way to do the beards. That's if I have the appropriate sized hackle. If the hackle's too long, you're going to need to just cut it away and just tie it in. I'm going to take same method and measure my white wings here. Use the hackle pliers again here. There's one wing. Got that loose. Set it on the edge of my pedestal. Yep, I've got the right feather. I had to double check because I got my feathers mixed up. Measure the other wing. Cut that away. Line the tips up. I'll do this with the tips facing up on this one. Those tips aligned. Go. Line it up so the wing is about almost halfway down the tail. Then I'll do the same thing. Come up with the thread between my thumb and the feather, back down the other side, and then just let the weight of the bobbin collapse that. I'm kind of pushing it down with my other hand too. And make sure you wrap forward. This being 70 denier, I don't have to worry about bulking that head up as bad. And I didn't check my wing, but That is pretty centered. I did have that split a little bit. I don't know if I can marry that back or not. Split a little bit on me. And since I didn't change my thread, what I'm going to do take a Sharpie, darken my thread. And that looks black to me.
So, Mike, will that black or will that bleed through at all? Or does it make really any difference?
I don't think it makes a lot of difference. I would let it dry before putting any head cement on there. I think in this case, my my far wing was a little bit thicker than my other wing, and it caused this to split, and it kind of rolled around to the bottom. So I'm going to see if I can pull that away. That part that split. There we go. That looks a lot better. This side looks better. This side, the wing kind of did collapse down on my side. But that's the Royal Coachman Wet fly.